and took them to the hospitals, and some victims were actually transported by family members and friends to the hospital. It's a very tragic incident.
When you think of Christmas parades, you envision families lined along the streets, children catching candy, the warm glow of holiday lights cutting through the winter cold. It's supposed to be one of the most innocent celebrations of the year. But on November 21st, 2021, in the small town of Waukesha, Wisconsin, that innocence was shattered in the most horrific way imaginable. A red Ford Escape SUV barreled through the crowded parade route at full speed, leaving 6 dead and dozens injured in its wake. But the horror didn't end there. The man behind the wheel, Darrell Brooks Jr., would go on to turn his murder trial into one of the most disturbing courtroom spectacles in recent memory. What happened when a mass killer decided to defend himself in court? The answer will shock you.
I'm gonna
all
let
of
the
a sudden
state.
nobody hears what I say.
I'm gonna let the state make a record of why they believe it's objectionable, because I haven't let them do that.
But what's even more disturbing is how he used the legal system to continue terrorizing his victims from behind bars. Before we dive into this shocking case, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for What the Verdict, your go-to channel for the most compelling real crime documentaries and shocking courtroom moments. If you're fascinated by the intersection of psychology and justice like we are, you're in the right place. The nightmare unfolds. The Waukesha Christmas Parade had been a beloved tradition for nearly 6 decades. On that crisp November evening, hundreds of families gathered along Main Street to watch the procession of floats, marching bands, and dancing troops. The air was filled with laughter and the sound of Christmas carols. Then, at approximately 4:39 p.m., the unthinkable happened. The red Ford Escape came careening down Main Street at approximately 30 miles per hour, weaving through the parade participants like a predator hunting prey. Witnesses described the horrific scene as the vehicle deliberately targeted the densest crowds, accelerating rather than braking when faced with human beings. The victims: Virginia Sorensen, 79, grandmother and avid volunteer Leanna Owen, 71, grandmother who loved to dance Tamara Durand, 52, elementary school teacher and mother Jane Coolidge, 52, beloved nurse and devoted mother Wilhelm Hospel, 81, grandfather who never missed a family gathering, Jackson Sparks 8, the youngest victim, a little boy who loved baseball. But the casualties extended far beyond those 6 lives. 62 people were injured, some critically. The Dancing Grannies, a beloved local performance group, was devastated. Multiple members were killed or injured in what should have been their moment of joy. But here's what makes this case even more disturbing. What Brooks did next would prove he felt absolutely no remorse for the carnage he'd caused. When police found him just minutes after the attack, his reaction was so chilling that even veteran officers were shocked. The man behind the wheel. Who was Darrell Brooks Jr.? Born on February 21, 1982, Brooks had a long criminal history that painted the picture of a man spiraling out of control. His rap sheet included charges for battery, strangulation, drug possession, and weapons violations. He had been arrested multiple times for domestic violence, with a pattern of targeting intimate partners. Just weeks before the parade attack, Brooks had allegedly run over the mother of his children with his vehicle following a domestic dispute. He had been released on a shockingly low $1,000 bail just days before the Christmas parade. But perhaps most chilling was what investigators discovered about his state of mind on November 21st. Just 18 minutes before the parade attack, Brooks had been involved in another domestic violence incident with his ex-girlfriend. He had punched her and then driven over her leg with his SUV, leaving her injured but alive. When police were called to that scene, Brooks fled, straight toward the parade route. The evidence was overwhelming that this was no accident. Rather than fleeing via the numerous side streets available, Brooks deliberately chose to drive straight through the parade route. Security camera footage revealed a chilling pattern. Brooks drove around barricades specifically designed to protect parade-goers. When confronted by a police officer on foot, Brooks swerved around him. Video evidence showed Brooks steering toward the densest crowds. He accelerated when approaching victims rather than braking, but what happened when Brooks was finally arrested would set the stage for one of the most disturbing trials in American legal history. The decision to represent himself. Brooks was found calmly knocking on a resident's door several blocks away, asking to use their phone. He showed no signs of panic or concern about what had just occurred. When arrested, his response was chilling. "For what? I don't know what you're talking about." Despite overwhelming evidence, his DNA on the airbag, dozens of witnesses, and clear video footage, Brooks made a fateful decision that would turn his murder trial into a complete circus. He chose to represent himself in court. By choosing pro se representation, Brooks was essentially handed a platform to terrorize the victims' families all over again, this time from the defendant's table in open court. Most legal experts agree that representing oneself in a capital murder case is professional suicide. But Brooks wasn't interested in mounting a competent defense. He was more interested in maintaining control and continuing to inflict trauma. Criminal psychologists who observed the trial noted several key behavioral patterns in Brooks: narcissistic personality traits with an inflated sense of self-importance, complete lack of empathy for his victims, pathological need to control every situation, inability to accept responsibility for his actions. The courtroom circus. The trial began on October 3, 2022, under Judge Jennifer Darrell. What followed was unlike anything the legal community had ever witnessed. It took just 7 minutes for Brooks to become so disruptive during jury selection that he had to be removed from the courtroom. Judge Darrell found herself in an impossible position, balancing Brooks's constitutional right to represent himself with the need to maintain courtroom decorum. Day 1, disruptions. Interrupted the judge 27 times during jury selection, refused to acknowledge the court's jurisdiction, made nonsensical legal arguments based on sovereign citizen ideology, spoke over prosecutors and court staff, stared menacingly at potential jurors. The judge was forced to implement an unprecedented system, a secondary courtroom equipped with audio-visual feeds where Brooks could be placed when his behavior became too disruptive. Judge Darrell repeatedly removed Brooks from the court for his outbursts and placed him in a nearby courtroom, where he could communicate via a monitor and microphone, which was most often muted. But the worst was yet to come. When the victims and their families took the stand to testify, Brooks would use his position as his own attorney to cross-examine the very people he had tried to kill. The victims forced to face their attacker. The most heartbreaking moments of the trial came when survivors and victims' family members were forced to testify while Brooks sat just feet away, the same man who had tried to kill them. From a surviving Dancing Grannies member, "I saw the red SUV coming toward us. I tried to run, but I wasn't fast enough. I felt the impact. I thought I was going to die. I still have nightmares." From Jackson Sparks's mother, the 8-year-old victim, Jackson was walking with his brother in the parade. He loved baseball. He loved life. This man took that away from us forever. The most disturbing aspect was Brooks's behavior during these testimonies. Brooks questioning his victims was like watching a predator toy with wounded prey. His cross-examinations were rambling, nonsensical, and clearly designed to re-traumatize rather than elicit meaningful information. Brooks, to a survivor. Do you recall seeing me in that vehicle? Victim: Yes, I saw you driving. Brooks: How do you know it was me? Could you see through the windshield? Victim, breaking down in tears: I know it was you because you looked right at me before you hit me. Judge Darrell frequently had to step in to protect witnesses from Brooks's aggressive questioning style. The trial became a daily nightmare for the families, forced to relive their trauma while their attacker controlled the proceedings. But Brooks's disruptions would reach new levels of chaos that shocked even seasoned legal observers. Daily chaos and disruption. The trial lasted nearly a month, and almost every day featured new disruptions, outbursts, and chaos orchestrated by Brooks. Multiple daily removals. Brooks was removed from the courtroom for interrupting opening statements, arguing with the judge for 30-plus minutes, and staring down Judge Darrell menacingly. Sovereign citizen. Nonsense. Throughout the trial, Brooks embraced sovereign citizen ideology, claiming the court had no jurisdiction over him, refusing to acknowledge his legal name, and making meaningless objections based on non-existent legal principles. The most memorable exchanges became viral moments. Judge Darrell: Mr. Brooks, you need to stop interrupting. Brooks: I object to you calling me Mr. Brooks. That's not my name. Judge: What would you like to be called? Brooks: I am a sovereign citizen, and you have no jurisdiction over me. Legal experts were unanimous. This wasn't a legitimate defense strategy, but rather the ramblings of a man desperate to avoid responsibility while continuing to terrorize his victims. The prosecution's overwhelming case. Despite Brooks's constant disruptions, the prosecution methodically built an ironclad case. Physical evidence, security camera footage showing Brooks driving through the parade, DNA evidence linking Brooks to the vehicle, digital evidence from Brooks' cell phone showing his location. Over 50 eyewitnesses who identified Brooks as the driver. Motive evidence, documentation of the domestic violence incident just minutes before the parade, Brooks's criminal history showing escalating violence, his deliberate choice to drive through the parade route rather than escape. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. This wasn't an accident. This was Darrell Brooks making a conscious decision to drive through a Christmas parade and kill innocent people. The evidence is overwhelming, and the defendant's own actions in this courtroom show you exactly who he is. Meanwhile, Brooks's defense relied on contradictory theories, claiming he wasn't there, had a medical episode, someone else was responsible, and that the court had no jurisdiction over him. None held any water. The verdict and sentencing on October 26, 2022, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Brooks was found guilty on all 76 charges, 6 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, 61 counts of recklessly endangering safety, 6 counts of hit-and-run causing death, 2 counts of hit-and-run causing injury. 1 count of bail jumping. Brooks showed no visible emotion as count after count came back guilty. The families of victims wept with relief, finally seeing justice. The sentencing. Judge Darrell sentenced Brooks to life in prison without the possibility of parole on each of the 6 homicide counts, to be served consecutively, plus an additional 766 years for the other charges. But before imposing sentence, Judge Darrell delivered one of the most powerful judicial statements in recent memory, wiping away tears as she spoke about the victim impact statements. The sentencing hearing lasted 2 days, with over 40 victim impact statements. Family members were finally given the opportunity to address Brooks directly. From Virginia Sorensen's daughter, You took my mother from me. She was 79 years old and had so much life left to live. You are evil, and I hope you rot in prison." Judge Darrell's final remarks were extraordinary. "Mr. Brooks, you have shown no remorse, no empathy, and no regard for human life. Your actions were not the result of an accident. They were the deliberate choices of a man who decided his problems were more important than the lives of innocent people. The only appropriate sentence is life in prison without the possibility of parole." The lasting impact. The Darrell Brooks case raises fundamental questions about justice, mental health, and defendants' rights. Should defendants be allowed to represent themselves when it clearly becomes a vehicle for further victimizing their targets? The case sparked discussions about reforming self-representation laws, particularly in cases involving multiple victims. Wisconsin has since passed legislation making it more difficult for defendants in mass casualty cases to represent themselves. The community's response. The Waukesha community's response became a model for resilience. The Waukesha Strong movement brought the community together and honored the victims' memories. The Christmas parade continues, and the dancing goes on. Current status: Brooks is housed in a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. He continues to file frivolous legal motions and appeals with virtually no chance of success. The families continue to struggle with trauma, but have found strength in advocacy and community support. Conclusion: evil on display. The case of Darrell Brooks represents one of the most disturbing chapters in recent American criminal justice history. It was a case where evil was on full display, not just in the original attack, but in Brooks's continued torment of his victims throughout the trial. As Judge Darrell said, "You, Mr. Brooks, are the epitome of evil. Your actions and your behavior throughout this trial have shown exactly who you are." 6 innocent people died because one man decided his personal problems were more important than human life. But in the end, justice was served. The community came together. The system worked despite Brooks's best efforts to derail it, and 6 consecutive life sentences ensure he will never terrorize innocent people again. As we remember Virginia Sorensen, Leanna Owen, Tamara Durand, Jane Coolidge, Wilhelm Hospel, and 8-year-old Jackson Sparks, we're reminded that while evil exists in this world, so does justice, community, and the unbreakable human spirit. The Christmas parade goes on. The dancing continues, and love always triumphs over hate. What do you think about this case? Should defendants like Darrell Brooks be allowed to represent themselves when it clearly becomes a vehicle for terrorizing victims? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this deep dive into one of the most disturbing courtroom dramas kept you engaged, make sure you're subscribed to What the Verdict for more shocking true crime documentaries. Hit that like button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our investigations into the cases that challenge our understanding of justice. Until next time, keep seeking the truth.